I stand on it, and you is not finna approach me as if I'm one of them stylists. I truly understand that some people really do be giving these clients the runaround. They play games, they tell them to come at such and such time, and then they stand them up. But like I said, baby, I'm not one of them, and my client's gonna forever vouch for me.
April 4th, 2023, 3 a.m. An Atlanta street goes silent after gunfire. A 21-year-old entrepreneur named Cameron Price bleeds out in the passenger seat of a bullet-riddled Escalade. Her boyfriend races desperately toward a hospital, praying she'll survive. She won't. Here's what makes this case unforgettable. Cameron's killer had never met her, never spoken to her, didn't know her name. He chose her randomly after turning to his friends and saying just 2 words. Watch this. This is the story of Cameron Olivia Price, a young woman whose only mistake was driving past the wrong person at the wrong moment. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why what happened to her could happen to anyone. But before we get to that deadly night in Atlanta, you need to understand who Cameron really was. Because her story isn't just about how she died, it's about the remarkable life she built in just 21 years. Cameron Olivia Price was born on July 7, 2001, in Lancaster, South Carolina, a small town where everyone knows everyone, and your reputation is built on character and how you treat people. From the moment she came into this world, there was something special about her. Her parents, Jesse and Creighton Price, described their daughter as having the brightest glow, and they didn't just say that because she was their child. Every single person who met Cameron felt it. To capture who their daughter truly was, Jesse and Creighton created an acronym from her name, Cameron. Captivating, ambitious, modest, radiant, youthful, noble. Each letter represented a piece of who she was. And if you knew Cameron, you knew these weren't just nice words her parents used to remember her. This was genuinely who she was every single day. Now, while most 21-year-olds are still figuring out what they want to do with their lives, Cameron had already built something extraordinary. At just 18 years old, she passed her state board exam and became a licensed hairstylist. But she didn't stop there. By 21, she was the CEO of her own product line called Camo Lace Adhesive, a specialized adhesive for lace front wigs. She worked at Boz Boutique in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where clients knew her as a young Boz lace guru. Cameron specialized in creating natural-looking lace front wigs, which requires an incredible level of skill and precision. This isn't something just anyone can do well. But Cameron? She was exceptional at it. She built a bi-coastal clientele that included local celebrities and influencers who specifically sought her out because they knew she delivered quality every single time. And here's what separated Cameron from everyone else in the beauty industry: her work ethic and professionalism. In an industry where some stylists have earned a reputation for canceling appointments, showing up late, or being unreliable, Cameron stood apart. She was punctual, she was professional, she was consistent, over and over again. Her clients didn't just come back, they became ambassadors for her brand, telling everyone they knew about this talented young woman who treated them with respect and made them feel beautiful. But Cameron's impact went far beyond her salon chair. She had a heart for her community that showed up in everything she did. She mentored aspiring cosmetology students, teaching them not just how to style hair, but how to build a business, how to treat clients, how to maintain professionalism. She spoke at local high school events, encouraging students to chase their dreams with the same determination she had. And here's something that really shows you who Cameron was. She quietly offered free hairstyling services to students who couldn't afford professional styling for prom. She didn't make a big public announcement about it. She didn't do it for recognition or praise. She just reached out to students facing financial struggles and made sure they felt beautiful on one of the most important nights of their lives. That was Cameron generous, without needing applause for it. She was exceptionally close with her sister, LaJessica. Not just siblings, but genuine best friends who could communicate with just a look, who celebrated each other's wins like they were their own. To Cameron, family wasn't just important, they were everything. Just days before her death, Cameron had a conversation with her father, Jesse, about her future. She told him about her dream of opening her own hair salon. Not just renting a chair or working in someone else's space, but building her own establishment where she could serve her community and create opportunities for other young stylists. She was already planning it out, the location, the services, the atmosphere she wanted to create. Cameron was also in a relationship with her boyfriend, Brandon. While they kept most of their relationship private, it was clear they shared a love of adventure and supported each other's goals. They enjoyed spending time together, whether that meant quiet nights at home or exciting trips to explore new places. On April 3rd, 2023, Cameron and Brandon decided to take a short vacation to Atlanta. They were visiting friends, taking a break from work, and planning to enjoy the city's famous nightlife. It was supposed to be fun, a few days of laughter, music, and making memories together. What was supposed to be a simple vacation became a nightmare that destroyed a family, shattered a community, and revealed just how dangerous random violence truly is. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing about violence isn't that it's planned or personal, it's that it's completely random. And on that trip to Atlanta, Cameron would cross paths with someone who valued human life so little, he was willing to end it just to impress his friends. Before we get into what happened that night, I want to ask you, have you ever been in the wrong place at the wrong time? Have you ever looked back on a moment and realized how differently things could have gone? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this story is a reminder that safety isn't always something we can control, no matter how good a person we are. In early April 2023, Cameron and Brandon decided to take a short vacation to Atlanta, Georgia. It was meant to be a break from their busy lives back in South Carolina, a chance to visit friends, experience the city's energy, and just enjoy themselves. Atlanta has always been a destination for young people across the South, looking for good music, great food, and a vibrant nightlife scene that pulses with life well into the early morning hours. For Cameron, who had been working tirelessly building her business and mentoring students in her community, this trip was a well-deserved opportunity to relax and have fun with someone she cared about. On the evening of April 3rd, Cameron and Brandon made plans to visit Magic City, a well-known establishment on Pryor Street in Southwest Atlanta. Now, if you're not familiar with Atlanta's nightlife, Magic City isn't just any venue. It's a cultural landmark that's been name-dropped in countless songs and has hosted everyone from local residents to celebrities and athletes. People come from all over to experience the atmosphere, the performances, and the music that keeps the place packed until the sun comes up. For Cameron and Brandon, it was simply a place to dance, listen to music, and enjoy the night together. The evening unfolded exactly as they'd hoped. They were surrounded by the energy of the crowd, the bass of the music vibrating through the floor, and the kind of carefree atmosphere that makes you forget about work deadlines and responsibilities. Cameron, with her natural radiance and joyful spirit, was in her element. She loved moments like these, moments where she could just be young, free, and present. Brandon was right there with her. And by all accounts, they were having a great time. There were no arguments, no confrontations, no uncomfortable encounters with anyone. It was just two people enjoying a night out in a city that never sleeps. As the hours passed and the clock approached 3 o'clock in the morning, Cameron and Brandon decided it was time to call it a night. They'd had their fun, made their memories, and now it was time to head back and get some rest. They walked out of Magic City and made their way to Brandon's vehicle, a black Cadillac Escalade parked nearby. Cameron settled into the front passenger seat, while Brandon took his place behind the wheel. They had no reason to feel anxious or worried. They were just two people heading home after a good night, completely unaware that someone had noticed them leaving. Brandon pulled out onto Pryor Street and began driving through the quiet early morning streets of southwest Atlanta. At that hour, the city takes on a different character. The crowds have thinned out, the traffic has disappeared, and there's a stillness that settles over the roads. It should have been a peaceful drive back to wherever they were staying. But as they approached the intersection of Pryor and Fulton Streets, something happened that would change everything. Another vehicle suddenly appeared alongside the Escalade, pulling up specifically on the passenger side right where Cameron was sitting. There was no warning, no honking, no shouting, nothing that would have given them even a second to react or understand what was about to happen. And then, in an instant, the night exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from the other vehicle, a rapid succession of shots that shattered the silence and tore through the Escalade with devastating force. The sound was deafening. The kind of sound that doesn't just fill your ears but reverberates through your entire body and freezes your blood. Bullets ripped through the metal frame of the vehicle, punching holes through the doors and windows. Glass exploded inward, sending sharp fragments flying in every direction. The back window disintegrated completely, and the passenger side where Cameron sat took the brunt of the assault. Brandon instinctively ducked as low as he could while trying to maintain control of the vehicle, his hands gripping the steering wheel as shards of glass cut into his skin. The attack lasted only seconds, but in those seconds, everything changed. When the gunfire finally stopped and the other vehicle sped away into the darkness, Brandon turned to check on Cameron, and what he saw filled him with a terror he'd never known before. Cameron had been struck multiple times. The injuries were severe, catastrophic in fact. Blood covered the passenger seat, and she wasn't responding. Brandon's mind raced as panic set in, but he knew he had to act immediately. There was no time to wait for help to arrive, no time to process what had just happened. His only thought was getting Cameron to a hospital as fast as possible. He pressed down on the accelerator and headed north on Interstate 75, driving toward Grady Memorial Hospital, one of Atlanta's major medical centers known for handling critical cases. The Escalade, now riddled with bullet holes and missing its back window entirely, flew down the highway as Brandon fought against time and prayed that Cameron would hold on. Eventually, near the Memorial Drive exit, law enforcement officers spotted the damaged vehicle and pulled Brandon over. When they approached and saw the condition of both the Escalade and its occupants, they immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The vehicle looked like it had been through a war zone. Bullet holes covered the exterior, the back window was completely gone, and the interior was a scene of destruction. Officers quickly called for emergency medical services, and within minutes, paramedics arrived on the scene. They found Cameron still alive, but in critical condition, her injuries so severe that every second counted. The paramedics worked with focused intensity to stabilize her enough for transport, knowing that her survival depended on getting her to the hospital's trauma unit as quickly as possible. Cameron was rushed by ambulance to Grady Memorial Hospital, where a trauma team was already prepared to receive her. The moment she arrived, doctors and nurses surrounded her, assessing the damage and immediately beginning emergency procedures. They worked with a kind of precision and urgency that comes from years of training and experience in handling the worst cases imaginable. But even as they fought to save her life, the reality of her injuries became increasingly clear. She had sustained multiple gunshot wounds, and the damage to her body was extensive. The medical team did everything within their power, utilizing every resource and technique available to them. But some injuries are simply too severe for even the most skilled professionals to overcome. While the doctors worked on Cameron in Atlanta, her parents, Jesse and Creighton, received the phone call that every parent dreads. The details were limited at first, but the message was clear. Their daughter had been involved in a shooting and was in critical condition at a hospital in Atlanta. Without hesitation, they got in their car and began the 4-hour drive from Lancaster, South Carolina to Atlanta. Those 4 hours must have felt like an eternity. Every mile stretched out before them as they clung to hope, praying that when they arrived, they would find Cameron alive and fighting. They imagined walking into her hospital room and seeing her awake, hearing her voice, holding her hand. They refused to consider any other possibility. But when Jesse and Creighton finally arrived at Grady Memorial Hospital, they were met by a detective who had been waiting for them. The conversation that followed confirmed their worst fear. Cameron had not survived her injuries. Despite the best efforts of the trauma team, despite the hours of emergency procedures and interventions, her wounds had been too severe. Their daughter, the young woman with the brightest smile, the thriving business, the generous heart, was gone. The pain that crashed over them in that moment was indescribable, the kind of grief that physically hurts and makes it hard to breathe. What made the experience even more traumatic was what they were forced to witness. In a later interview, Creighton spoke about the horror of seeing her daughter in that hospital bed, describing the graphic reality of Cameron's injuries in a way that revealed just how violent and brutal the attack had been. She said, "Seeing your daughter laying in the hospital bed with her brains hanging out over her head, my God, that is a hard pill to swallow. No parent should ever have to see their child like that. No family should have to carry that image with them for the rest of their lives." But that was the reality the Price family faced, and it became a permanent scar on their hearts. Less than 24 hours after being rushed into Grady Memorial Hospital, Cameron Olivia Price was pronounced dead. She was only 21 years old. The official cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds sustained during the attack on Pryor Street. The Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed her identity and documented the circumstances of her death, adding her name to the growing list of lives lost to gun violence in Atlanta that year. For Jesse Price, the loss of his daughter brought with it a question that consumed him day and night. Why? Why would someone do this to Cameron? What could she have possibly done to provoke such violence? In interviews following the incident, Jesse expressed his anguish, saying, "I just want to know why. Was it for her? There is no way my daughter had a problem with anybody that would cause that person or people to want to shoot and kill my daughter." He knew Cameron's character. He knew how she treated people, how she moved through the world with kindness and respect. The idea that someone would deliberately target her for death made absolutely no sense to him, and that lack of understanding only deepened his pain. Creighton shared her husband's belief that Cameron had not been the intended target. "Everybody loved Cameron. Everybody," she told reporters. "I'm talking about everyone. I know it wasn't her that they were after." This belief offered a small, terrible comfort. At least their daughter hadn't been murdered by someone who knew her and hated her specifically. But it also meant that her death was even more senseless, more random, and more preventable. It meant that Cameron had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that realization was almost harder to accept than any other explanation. For 7 months, the Price family would live with these questions. 7 months of sleepless nights, of tears that wouldn't stop, of holidays and celebrations that felt empty without Cameron's presence. 7 months of waiting, hoping, and praying that law enforcement would find whoever was responsible for taking their daughter's life. But what they didn't know yet was that the person who had pulled that trigger had already made a critical mistake, one that would eventually lead investigators right to his door. In the hours following Cameron's death, Atlanta police homicide detectives began the difficult work of trying to understand what had just happened. Brandon became their most critical witness, and they questioned him extensively at the hospital. Had there been any arguments at Magic City that night? Did anyone approach them aggressively? Had they noticed anyone following them? Did Cameron have any conflicts with people in Atlanta? Brandon's answers were consistent and clear. They had come to the city for a short vacation to visit friends and enjoy themselves. There had been no confrontations, no hostile encounters, no arguments with anyone. They hadn't even noticed anyone paying unusual attention to them. They were simply two people having a good night out, and then suddenly, they were under attack. Detectives expanded their investigation beyond Brandon, reaching out to everyone who knew Cameron back in South Carolina. They spoke with her family, her friends, her clients, her business associates, even people who had only brief interactions with her. The questions were direct and necessary. Did Cameron have enemies? Was there anyone who might have wanted to harm her? Had she been involved in any disputes or conflicts recently? Had anyone made threats against her? The responses from everyone painted the same clear picture. Cameron's mother, Creighton, summed it up perfectly when she told investigators, "Everybody loved Cameron. Everybody." I know it wasn't her they were after. Person after person confirmed that Cameron wasn't someone who created problems or made enemies. She treated people with kindness and respect. If anyone had issues with her, nobody seemed to know about it. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. The initial urgency that follows any homicide began to fade as leads dried up and witnesses couldn't provide useful information. The chaotic environment of a nightclub at 3 in the morning made finding reliable witnesses incredibly difficult. Most people who had been at Magic City that night were either intoxicated or had already left the area before the shooting occurred. Nobody came forward with information about suspicious vehicles or people acting strangely. The attack had happened so quickly, in the middle of the night, on a street where the only witnesses were the victim and her boyfriend. For the Price family, this period became an exercise in patience and pain. Jesse and Creighton made public pleas for information, hoping that someone, somewhere, knew something that could help bring justice for their daughter. They attended police briefings, stayed in constant contact with detectives, and waited. April became May. May became June. Summer passed into fall. 7 months of not knowing. 7 months of questions without answers. 7 months of grief compounded by uncertainty. But while the case appeared stalled to the outside world, the truth was already beginning to surface in an unexpected way. On a day in May 2023, just 1 month after Cameron's murder, a man named Ja'Cory Kiana Echols was pulled over during a routine traffic stop in Duluth County. The 22-year-old from Ellenwood, Georgia, had violated several traffic laws, and officers had probable cause to search his vehicle. What they discovered turned a simple traffic stop into something much more serious. Echols was charged with hit and run, reckless driving, and additional charges related to drugs and weapons. Most significantly, officers found an unregistered handgun in his possession. This discovery became particularly problematic for Echols because of his criminal background. Back in August 2019, when he was just 18 or 19 years old, Echols had pleaded guilty in a Cobb County courtroom to financial identity fraud stemming from an incident in 2018. Instead of serving prison time, he received a 5-year probation sentence, which gave him an opportunity to avoid incarceration if he could stay out of trouble and follow the rules. One of those rules was explicit: no possession of firearms. The gun found in his vehicle during the May 2023 traffic stop violated that probation in the most direct way possible. Echols posted bond and was released after spending some time in jail during the summer of 2023. However, the probation violation caught up with him. In late September 2023, he was taken back into custody and sent to state prison, specifically Jackson State Prison and the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. As far as Echols knew, He was simply serving time for violating his probation. He thought the consequences were limited to the weapons charge and his failure to comply with the terms of his 2019 sentence. He had no idea that detectives were quietly building a case against him for something far more serious. While sitting in his prison cell, Eccles made a decision that would ultimately seal his fate. He began talking to another inmate about his activities, and during these conversations, he allegedly started boasting about being involved in a shooting near the Magic City nightclub back in April. He wasn't vague or general in his account. According to law enforcement officials, he provided specific details about Cameron's murder, information that had never been released to the public, details that only someone directly involved in the shooting would know. The inmate listening to these confessions was facing his own legal troubles and saw an opportunity to potentially reduce his own sentence. He reached out to authorities and provided them with everything Eccles had told him. The testimony aligned with evidence that investigators had already collected and filled in crucial gaps in their understanding of what had happened that night. Armed with this new information, detectives moved quickly to gather physical evidence. They focused their attention on the handgun that had been confiscated from Eccles during the May 2023 traffic stop. The weapon was sent to ballistics experts for detailed forensic testing. These experts compared the gun to the shell casings that had been recovered at the crime scene where Cameron was shot. The science of ballistics examination is precise and reliable. Every firearm leaves unique markings on the bullets and casings it fires, creating a signature as individual as a fingerprint. When the results came back from the lab, they provided exactly what prosecutors needed. The handgun found in Eccles' vehicle was definitively matched to the weapon used in the shooting that killed Cameron Price. The gun that had already landed him back in prison for violating his probation was the same gun that had fired the shots that ended a young woman's life. On the 8th of November 2023, exactly 7 months after Cameron's death, Atlanta police had enough evidence to move forward. Because Eccles was already incarcerated on the probation violation, authorities didn't have to search far to find him. He was formally arrested and charged in connection with the fatal shooting. The charges were severe and reflected the seriousness of the allegations: murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Eccles was transferred from the state prison system to the Fulton County Jail, where he was held without bond. During subsequent bail hearings, judges repeatedly denied his requests for release, citing his criminal history, the severity of the charges, and the substantial evidence against him. Through his attorney, Eccles maintained his innocence, arguing that this was a case of mistaken identity and that prosecutors had arrested the wrong man. For Jesse and Creighton Price, the news of the arrest brought complex emotions. There was relief that someone had finally been held accountable, gratitude toward the detectives who had persisted in finding answers, and hope that justice might be served. But even with a suspect in custody, one crucial question remained unanswered, the question that tormented them more than any other: why? The family finally knew who had allegedly killed their daughter, but they still didn't understand the reason behind such violence. The surveillance footage recovered during the investigation would soon reveal a truth so random and senseless that it continues to haunt everyone who learns about this case. Do you trust jailhouse informant testimony in murder cases? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Ja'Cory Eccles was sitting in Fulton County Jail, charged with taking Cameron's life. But the question that kept Jesse Price awake at night, the question that consumed Creighton's every waking moment, was the one that still had no answer. Why? What could possibly drive someone to shoot and kill a young woman they'd never even met? Was there bad blood between Eccles and Brandon? Had Cameron somehow crossed paths with him before? Did this go back to some old dispute? Some conflict that had festered and exploded into violence that night? Investigators worked to answer those exact questions. They combed through Cameron's social media accounts, her text messages, her call logs. They interviewed her friends, her clients, her business associates. They looked for any thread that might connect her world to Eccles's world. They examined Brandon's background too, searching for any overlap, any shared acquaintance, any reason someone from Eccles' circle might have targeted them. The detectives conducted the same exhaustive investigation into Eccles' life, looking for any indication that he knew either of them, that their paths had crossed before, that there was history between them. What they found was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ja'Cory Eccles had never met Cameron Price. He had never met Brandon. There were no mutual friends connecting them, no shared workplaces, no overlap in their social circles. They didn't go to the same schools, didn't frequent the same places, didn't know the same people. Before that night outside Magic City, Eccles and Cameron had never been in the same room together. They were complete strangers, living separate lives in separate worlds. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't personal. This wasn't the result of some long-standing feud or conflict. The reality was far more disturbing than that. As prosecutors built their case, they obtained surveillance footage from a gas station near the club on Pryor Street. The footage captured the moments leading up to the attack, and what it revealed would become the most chilling piece of evidence in the entire case. The timestamp on the video showed it was recorded in the early morning hours of April 4th, just minutes before Cameron was shot. The footage showed Eccles at the gas station, and his behavior was immediately concerning. He appeared heavily intoxicated, stumbling slightly as he moved around. His movements were erratic and aggressive. He was clearly agitated, getting into a heated argument with people he was with. The exchange appeared tense, with raised voices and aggressive gestures. Then something happened that changed everything. Brandon's black Cadillac Escalade drove past the gas station. It was just a car driving by on a public street. There was nothing unusual about it, nothing that should have drawn anyone's attention. Cameron was in the passenger seat. Brandon was behind the wheel. They were simply driving, probably talking about where they were staying, maybe laughing about something funny that had happened at the club, making plans for the next day. They had no idea anyone was watching them. They had no idea that in the next 60 seconds, their lives would change forever. The surveillance camera captured Eccles noticing the Escalade. He turned to the people he was with, and prosecutors confirmed what happened next, based on witness statements from those who were there. Eccles said 2 words. Just 2 words that would seal Cameron's fate and end her life. He said, "Watch this." That was it. Watch this. 2 words that carried the weight of a death sentence. He got into a vehicle, and the footage showed him pulling out of the gas station lot. He followed the Escalade. Within seconds, he pulled up alongside the passenger side where Cameron sat, and he opened fire. The entire sequence, from the moment the Escalade drove past to the moment shots were fired, took less than a minute. Prosecutors presented their theory of what happened based on the evidence. Ja'Cory Eccles, intoxicated and looking to prove something to the people he was with, saw an opportunity when that black Escalade drove by. He decided, on a whim, to show off, to demonstrate that he was willing to do something violent, to prove he was someone to be feared. There was no planning. There was no careful selection of a target. There was no motive rooted in anger or revenge or money. It was random. Cameron Price died because a drunk man with a gun wanted to impress his friends. She died because someone decided that a human life meant so little that it could be taken simply to make a point, to put on a show, to say, "Watch this," and prove he was capable of violence. The randomness of it was almost impossible to process. If Cameron and Brandon had left the club 2 minutes earlier, they would have driven past that gas station before Eccles arrived. If they had left 2 minutes later, he might have already been gone. If they had taken a different route back to where they were staying, they never would have driven past that gas station at all. The margin between life and death came down to timing so precise it felt cruel. Prosecutors confirmed what the Price family had believed from the beginning. This was a completely random attack. Cameron wasn't targeted because of who she was or what she had done. She wasn't involved in anything criminal. She hadn't made enemies. She hadn't taken risks or put herself in dangerous situations. Her only misfortune was being in that Escalade, on that street, at that exact moment when an intoxicated man with a gun decided to follow through on an impulse. While Ja'Cory Echols remained behind bars, Jesse and Creighton Price faced a choice. They could retreat into their grief, or they could honor their daughter by ensuring her spirit of generosity lived on. 6 months after losing Cameron, they chose action. In January 2024, the Cameron Olivia Foundation became official. Creighton serves as president, Jesse as vice president, and together with their board, they've turned their pain into purpose. The foundation operates with one clear goal: continue the work Cameron started. They focus on 3 specific areas. First, scholarships for cosmetology students, tuition, supplies, licensing fees. All the barriers that keep talented young people from pursuing beauty careers are removed. Students in Chester County who share Cameron's passion now have a path forward, regardless of their bank accounts. Second, mentorship programs. Experienced stylists connect with newcomers, teaching them not just technique, but business sense. How to build clientele. How to handle difficult situations. How to maintain professionalism in an industry where many don't. It's exactly what Cameron did when she was alive, now formalized and reaching more people. Third, free prom styling. Every year, students who can't afford professional hair and makeup receive full services. No teenager misses their chance to feel beautiful on one of high school's biggest nights. Cameron did this quietly during her life. Now her family does it loudly, in her name. The salon Cameron planned to open will never exist, but her impact now reaches further than any single location ever could. As of November 2024, Ja'Cory Echols remains in Fulton County Jail. He's been denied bond multiple times. The case sits in pre-trial phase, more than a year after his arrest. There's no trial date scheduled yet. These delays aren't unusual for complex murder cases. Pre-trial procedures take time: grand jury indictments, discovery exchanges, legal motions. Courts must coordinate prosecutors, defense attorneys, witnesses, and jury pools. Fulton County handles thousands of cases, and murder trials require careful preparation to ensure justice is properly served. The Price family attends every hearing. They stay connected with the prosecution team. They wait, as difficult as waiting is, because they know the system must work correctly. When the trial does happen, prosecutors will present their evidence: the ballistics match, the jailhouse confession, the surveillance footage showing those 2 words, and Brandon's account of that night. A jury will decide if that evidence proves guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Jesse, Creighton, and LaJessica continue to live with a hole that will never heal, but they also live with determination. Cameron achieved more in 21 years than many do in twice that time. She built a business, touched countless lives, and showed her community what generosity looks like. Through the foundation bearing her name, her brightest glow, that phrase her parents used to describe her, keeps shining. Every scholarship recipient carries forward her dream. Every mentored stylist learns her values. Every student who walks into prom feeling confident experiences her kindness. 2 words from a stranger's mouth, "Watch this," stole Cameron's future. But those words couldn't touch what she built, the lives she changed, or the legacy she left behind. If Cameron's story moved you, consider supporting the Cameron Olivia Foundation. Share this video so others learn her name. Subscribe to stay updated on the trial when it begins. And let me ask you, Do you think our justice system moves too slowly in cases like this? And based on everything you've heard, the ballistics evidence, the confession, the surveillance footage, do you think Ja'Cory Echols will be convicted?